The coffee tasted bitter that morning, though I'd made it the same way I always did. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, stirred exactly 3 times. I stood by the office window watching the city wake up below, the usual rhythm of cars and pedestrians moving like clockwork. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Meeting with Derek, 9 a.m. I smiled slightly, remembering how we used to joke about corporate meetings back in college. Now here we were, 8 years later, working at the same tech firm we dreamed about joining. Derek had just been promoted to vice president of operations last week. I was genuinely happy for him. We'd been best friends since freshman year, survived terrible roommates together, celebrated each other's wins, supported each other through losses. When he got the promotion, I was the first person he called. We'd gone out for drinks, laughed about old times, talked about the future. Everything felt normal, familiar. But that morning, standing by that window, something felt different. The air in the office seemed heavier somehow. I couldn't place it. I finished my coffee and headed toward the conference room. Derek was already there when I walked in. He sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, formal. Not like the Derek who'd crashed on my couch last month after a bad date. Not like the friend who knew my coffee order by heart. This Derek wore his new title like armor. "Close the door," he said without looking up. I did, feeling my pulse quicken slightly. Something was wrong. "Have a seat, Ben." I sat across from him, searching his face for answers. He finally looked at me and his eyes were cold. Practiced. Like he'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. "I'm restructuring the development team," he began, his voice measured. "We're moving in a new direction, and unfortunately, your position no longer aligns with our strategic goals." The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What are you saying?" "You're being let go. Effective immediately." My throat went dry. This was Derek, my best friend. The guy who'd borrowed money from me 3 months ago. The guy whose wedding I was supposed to be best man at next year. "Derek, what is this?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a termination letter, already signed by HR. Already processed. This wasn't a conversation. It was an execution. "This isn't personal," he said, but his voice wavered slightly. "It's business. The company needs fresh perspectives, and frankly, your recent performance hasn't met expectations." I stared at him, stunned. My performance had been excellent. I'd closed 3 major client deals in the past quarter alone. I'd mentored half the junior developers. I'd worked weekends without complaint. "You know that's not true," I said quietly. He looked away. "The decision is final. Security will escort you out within the hour." I sat there for a moment, processing. Then something clicked. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes. The tremor in his voice when he said, "Not personal." This wasn't about performance. This was about something else. I stood slowly, keeping my voice calm. "You're making a mistake." "I don't think so," he replied, finally looking at me with something that almost resembled guilt. "Goodbye, Ben." I walked out of that room feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked. My desk had already been cleared. Someone from IT stood nearby with a cardboard box containing my few personal items. A photo of my parents. A coffee mug. A small plant that somehow survived my neglect. The efficiency of it all was startling. They'd planned this carefully. Timed it perfectly. Made sure I couldn't argue or negotiate. Security appeared, a young guy named Troy who looked uncomfortable. "Sorry, man," he muttered. "Just doing my job." "I know." We rode the elevator down in silence. The lobby felt different now, like a place I'd never belonged. People I'd worked with for 5 years avoided eye contact. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved it wasn't them. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright. I stood on the sidewalk, box in my arms, watching people rush past. None of them knew my world had just collapsed. None of them cared. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister, Nina. "Lunch this week." I stared at it, then typed back. "Can you talk now?" She called within seconds. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. The meeting. Derek's cold delivery. The immediate termination. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Ben," she finally said, "do you remember what Dad left you?" I froze on that sidewalk, people flowing around me like water around a stone. My father. He'd passed away 2 years ago, leaving me devastated and surprisingly wealthy. He'd been a quiet man, an early investor in tech startups back when everyone thought the internet was a fad. One of those startups was the company where I now stood, jobless, on the curb. "The shares," I whispered. Nina's voice came through clear and sharp. "Exactly. Dad left you 42% of the company stock. You're not just an employee, Ben. You're the largest individual shareholder." My mind raced. When I joined the company 5 years ago, I'd never mentioned my ownership stake. It felt wrong somehow, like I'd be using my father's legacy as leverage. I'd wanted to earn my place through work, not inheritance. The shares sat in a trust, managed quietly by our family attorney. I received dividend statements quarterly but rarely looked at them. The money went into savings. I'd almost forgotten about it. "Derek doesn't know," I said slowly. "Nobody knows." Nina laughed, a sharp sound. "Then it's time they found out. Call Howard. Now." Howard Mitchell was our family attorney, the man who'd managed Dad's estate. I hadn't spoken to him in months. I found a coffee shop 2 blocks away and called Howard from a corner table. He answered on the second ring. "Ben, good to hear from you. Everything all right?" "Not exactly." I explained the situation, my voice low. The firing. Derek's coldness. The immediate escort from the building. Howard listened without interrupting. When I finished, I heard him typing. "Let me pull up the current shareholder structure," he said. More typing. Then silence. "Howard." "Ben, you currently hold 42.3% of outstanding shares. The next largest stakeholder is the founding board at 18%, followed by various institutional investors. Your friend Derek holds 0.05% through his employee stock options." I let that sink in. Derek had fired the person who effectively controlled the company. "What are my options?" "Several," Howard said. "But first I need to ask, what do you want? Reinstatement? Compensation? Control?" I thought about Derek's face across that conference room table. The practiced coldness. The betrayal. "I want answers," I said. "And I want them to understand what they've done." Then we start with a board meeting. As the majority shareholder, you can call one at any time. Howard scheduled an emergency board meeting for Friday morning. 3 days away. I spent those days quietly gathering information. I called contacts still working at the company, people who trusted me. What I learned made my blood run cold. Derek had been planning this for weeks, probably since before his promotion. He'd convinced the executive team that the development department needed restructuring. That meant firing 8 people, including me. All of them were original employees who'd been there before the company went public. All of them were loyal to the founder's vision, my father's vision. Derek wanted to bring in his own team. People he'd worked with at his previous job. People who owed him loyalty. It wasn't about performance. It was about power. He was building an empire, and we were in the way. I also discovered something else. The company's stock price had dropped 11% since Derek's promotion. Investors were nervous about the sudden leadership changes. Major clients were asking questions. The restructuring Derek had promised wasn't strengthening the company. It was destabilizing it. On Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from our friendship. Late-night coding sessions in college. The day we both got hired. His birthday party last year where he'd given a toast calling me his brother. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit I rarely wore. Navy blue, perfectly tailored. My father's watch on my wrist. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Someone harder. More focused. Howard met me outside the building at 8:30. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." We walked through the same lobby I'd been escorted from 3 days ago. Troy, the security guard, did a double take when he saw me. I gave him a small nod. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than I remembered. The boardroom was already full when we entered. 7 board members sat around the mahogany table. Derek stood near the window, his back to us. He turned when the door opened. His face went pale. "What is he doing here?" Derek demanded, looking at the board chairman. "He was fired. He has no business in this meeting." Chairman Patricia Wells, a sharp woman in her 60s, gestured to an empty seat. "Mr. Harrison has every right to be here. In fact, he called this meeting." Derek's confusion was visible. "I don't understand." Howard opened his briefcase and distributed folders to each board member. These documents show the current shareholder distribution of this company. As you'll see, Benjamin Harrison holds 42.3% of all outstanding shares, making him the single largest stakeholder. The room went silent. I watched Derek's face as understanding crashed over him like a wave. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted from the folder to me, then back again. "That's impossible," he whispered. Patricia Wells studied the documents, then looked at me with new interest. "Mr. Harrison, I knew your father well. He was a brilliant investor and a good man. I didn't realize you'd inherited his position." "I preferred to keep it quiet," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I wanted to earn my place through work, not ownership." Derek found his voice. "This doesn't change anything. The restructuring is necessary for company growth." "Is it?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "Because the stock price has dropped 11% since you started. 3 major clients have requested contract reviews. And you've fired 8 people who collectively had 72 years of experience with this company." One of the board members, an older man named Kenneth, leaned forward. "Derek, you told us this restructuring would stabilize operations and increase efficiency. So far, we've seen the opposite." Derek's confidence was cracking. "These are short-term adjustments. Long-term, my strategy will prove valuable." I pulled out my own folder. "I have documentation here showing that the 8 people you fired, including me, were responsible for 83% of successful client retention last quarter." I distributed copies around the table. Derek's face flushed red. "Where did you get that information?" "Those are confidential company metrics." "I'm a shareholder," I said calmly. "I have access to company performance data. And what I see concerns me deeply." Patricia Wells studied the documents I'd provided. "These numbers are accurate?" "Completely verifiable," Howard confirmed. Kenneth shook his head slowly. "Derek, you fired your top performers." "Why?" Derek straightened, trying to regain control. "They were resistant to change. I need a team that's aligned with my vision for the company's future." "Your vision?" I asked quietly. "Or your need for control?" His eyes flashed with anger. "This is business, Ben. Not personal. Just because we're friends doesn't mean I owe you a job." "You're right," I said. "Friendship shouldn't factor into business decisions. But neither should ego. You didn't fire me because of my performance. You fired me because I knew you before you had power. Because I remembered when you were unsure and humble. Because I represented the old Derek, and you wanted to bury him." The room was completely silent now. Derek's hands trembled slightly. He looked cornered, desperate. "You don't know what you're talking about." Patricia Wells set down her papers. "Gentlemen, I think we need to address the real issue here. Derek, your restructuring has caused significant instability. Client confidence is wavering. Employee morale is at an all-time low. And now we discover you terminated our largest shareholder without conducting basic due diligence." Derek's voice rose. "I didn't know he was a shareholder. He never told anyone." "That's my point," Patricia said sharply. "You made a major personnel decision without proper research. What else haven't you researched?" Kenneth nodded in agreement. "I'm starting to question whether this promotion was premature." I watched Derek's world collapse in real time. His new title, his authority, his carefully constructed image all crumbling. Part of me felt satisfaction. But another part, the part that remembered studying together until 3 a.m, felt something closer to sadness. "I'd like to make a proposal," I said, looking around the table. Everyone turned to me. "The company doesn't need more chaos right now. It needs stability. I propose we reinstate the 8 terminated employees, including myself. We conduct a thorough review of current operations. And we implement a transition plan that doesn't rely solely on Derek's untested strategies. Patricia raised an eyebrow. And Derek's position? I looked at my former friend. He stared back, jaw clenched, pride wounded. Derek keeps his VP title, I said. But he reports directly to the board until we're confident in the new direction. He works with the existing team, not against them. Derek's voice was cold. You're enjoying this? Humiliating me in front of the board. No, I said honestly. I'm not. But you made choices, Derek. Choices that hurt people and damaged this company. Those choices have consequences. Patricia Wells looked around the table. All in favor of Mr. Harrison's proposal? 5 hands went up immediately. Kenneth hesitated, then raised his. Patricia's hand went up last. Motion carries. She turned to Derek. You'll report to this board weekly until further notice. Any major decisions require board approval. Understood? Derek nodded stiffly, his face expressionless. Understood. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some stopping to shake my hand. Howard packed his briefcase, giving me a small smile. Well done. When the room finally emptied, only Derek and I remained. We stood on opposite sides of the table, the space between us feeling vast. I didn't know, he said finally, about the shares. I swear I didn't know. Would it have changed anything? I asked. He looked away. I don't know. We stood there for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was doing the right thing. For who? I asked. The company? Or yourself? He flinched. When they promoted me, everyone kept saying I needed to make my mark. Show strong leadership. Prove I deserved the position. I thought that meant making bold moves, cleaning house, starting fresh. It meant listening, I said. Understanding what actually needed fixing before you started breaking things. Derek sank into a chair, his earlier confidence completely gone. He looked exhausted. But this was the Derek I knew, underneath all the corporate armor. I was scared, he admitted. Everyone was watching, waiting for me to fail. I thought if I showed any weakness, any hesitation, they'd realize I wasn't qualified. So you became someone else. Someone harder. Crueler. He nodded slowly. I told myself it was necessary. That friendship couldn't interfere with business. But when I looked across that table and told you that you were fired, I felt sick. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about college, about everything we'd been through together. But you didn't call, I said. You didn't apologize or explain. You just let it stand. Derek looked up at me, eyes red. I was ashamed. And then I was defensive. I convinced myself you deserved it, that you were holding the team back. I created this whole narrative where firing you was the right decision. I needed to believe it because the alternative meant admitting I'd betrayed my best friend for no good reason. I sat down across from him. The anger I'd felt was fading, replaced by something more complicated. You hurt me, Derek. Not just professionally. You made me question 8 years of friendship. I kept asking myself if you'd ever really cared, or if I was just useful until you didn't need me anymore. I cared, he said quickly. I still care. But I lost perspective. I let the promotion go to my head. I started believing my own press, thinking I knew better than everyone else. Including people who'd proven themselves long before you got that title. He nodded. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry. Not because you turned out to be a major shareholder, but because I treated you like you were disposable when you were anything but. I studied his face, searching for deception. I'd known Derek long enough to tell when he was lying. Right now, he looked broken and honest. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. We're going to rebuild what you damaged. We're going to bring back the people you fired, the ones who want to return. We're going to stabilize client relationships. And you're going to learn what real leadership looks like. Derek nodded. Whatever you need. I need you to understand something, I continued. You don't earn respect by making people fear you. You earn it by making them trust you. By admitting when you're wrong. By putting the mission above your ego. I understand. Do you? I asked. Because a week ago, you threw away years of friendship to look powerful. That's not strength, Derek. That's insecurity. He was quiet for a moment. How do I fix this? You start by apologizing to everyone you hurt. Not a corporate apology, a real one. You acknowledge what you did wrong. You listen when people tell you the problems you created. And you work twice as hard as everyone else until you've earned back even a fraction of the trust you destroyed. Derek stood slowly. I'll do it. All of it. I don't know if it's enough, but I'll try. I stood too, picking up my folder. That's all anyone can ask. We walked to the door together. Before we left, Derek stopped. Ben, can I ask you something? What? Why didn't you just fire me? Derek asked. You have the power. You could have walked into that boardroom and demanded my termination. Why give me another chance? I thought about that. Because despite everything, I remember who you were before power changed you. I remember the guy who helped me through my father's death. Who stayed up with me when I couldn't sleep, who made terrible jokes trying to make me laugh. That person is still in there somewhere. Maybe buried under corporate ambition and fear, but still there. Derek's eyes glistened. I don't deserve your mercy. Probably not, I agreed. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because this company meant something to my father. He believed in building things that lasted, creating places where people could do their best work. I owe it to him to try to preserve that, even if it means working with someone who betrayed me. We stepped into the hallway. Employees passing by stared, clearly aware something significant had happened. News traveled fast in corporate environments. By Monday, everyone would know about the board meeting, about my shares, about Derek's reduced authority. People are going to talk, Derek said. Let them, I replied. As long as we do the work, the rest doesn't matter. Over the next week, we began the rebuilding process. I spent Monday calling the 8 people Derek had fired. The conversations were difficult, emotional. Some were angry, understandably so. Others were relieved to hear they might get their jobs back. 2 had already accepted positions elsewhere and politely declined to return. The remaining 6 agreed to come back, though I could hear wariness in their voices. They wanted assurances this wouldn't happen again. I gave them what I could, honest answers and a promise to be present, to use my shareholder position to protect the people who'd built this company. On Tuesday, we held an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main conference hall, faces curious and concerned. Patricia Wells opened the meeting, explaining the board's decision to adjust leadership structure. She was diplomatic, never directly criticizing Derek, but the message was clear. Things would be different going forward. When she finished, Derek stepped to the microphone. I could see him sweating, hands gripping the podium. This was harder for him than any business presentation he'd ever given. I made mistakes, he began, voice unsteady. Serious mistakes. I let the pressure of my new position convince me that being tough meant being harsh. That leadership meant making unilateral decisions without consulting the people who know this company best. The room was silent, everyone watching. I fired good people, Derek continued. People who'd given years to this company, who'd proven their value repeatedly. I did it because I was insecure and because I thought showing strength meant showing no weakness. Derek's voice grew steadier as he continued. I hurt people I cared about. I damaged client relationships. I destabilized teams that were functioning well. And I did it all while telling myself it was for the company's good. But it wasn't. It was ego, pure and simple. He paused, looking around the room. I can't undo what I did. But I can commit to doing better. I can listen instead of dictate. I can admit when I'm wrong. I can work to rebuild the trust one destroyed. That's what I'm going to do, whether it takes months or years. Someone in the back started clapping. Slowly, others joined. It wasn't enthusiastic applause, more like cautious acknowledgement. Derek had said the right words, but actions would determine whether people believed them. After the meeting, I found myself surrounded by colleagues wanting to talk. Some thanked me for coming back. Others had questions about my shareholder status, about what my plans were. I answered honestly. I wasn't here to run the company day to day. I had my own role, my own work to do. But I would be present, engaged, protecting the culture my father had helped create. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. The company began to stabilize. Client concerns eased when they learned the team they'd worked with was back. Employee morale improved, slowly but noticeably. Derek threw himself into the work of rebuilding. He started having weekly one-on-ones with department heads, actually listening to their concerns instead of pushing his agenda. He asked questions instead of giving orders. He admitted mistakes in real time, publicly, without defensiveness. It wasn't easy for him. I could see the effort it took, the constant battle against his instinct to control everything. But he was trying, genuinely trying. One afternoon about a month after the board meeting, Derek came to my office. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure." He sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to update you on the client retention numbers. We're at 94%, up from 87% when I started this mess. That's good progress." "It is," he agreed. "But it's not why I'm here. I wanted to talk about us. About our friendship." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay. I don't know if we can get back to where we were," Derek said. "I'm not sure we should. The person I was in college, the person who was your friend, he wouldn't have done what I did. When I fired you, something broke between us. Maybe permanently." I nodded. "Maybe. But I'd like to try," he continued. "Not to go back, but to build something new. A friendship between who we actually are now, not who we were 8 years ago." I considered his words carefully. The wound was still fresh, still tender. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal quickly or easily. But I also knew that people could change, could grow. I'd seen glimpses of that growth in Derek over the past month. "I can't promise it'll be the same," I said finally. "You're right that something broke. But maybe broken things can be rebuilt differently, stronger in some ways because they've been tested." Derek nodded. "I'll take that." We worked together over the following months, developing a professional rhythm that was different from before but functional. We weren't grabbing drinks after work or texting memes at midnight. But we could sit in meetings, disagree respectfully, find solutions together. The company continued stabilizing. By quarter's end, we'd exceeded revenue projections. The stock price rebounded, climbing past where it had been before Derek's promotion. Board meetings became less tense, more focused on growth than damage control. I started attending regularly, exercising my rights as majority shareholder. I learned the business side, the strategic planning, the long-term vision work. It wasn't the role I'd planned for myself, but it felt right. Like honoring my father's legacy while building my own. One evening, I was working late when Nina called. "How's it going with Derek?" she asked. "Better," I said. "Not perfect, but better." "Do you trust him again?" she asked. I thought about that. I'm learning to trust his commitment to being better. I don't know if I'll ever trust him the way I did before. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that version of trust was naive, based on nostalgia more than reality. "You've changed too," Nina observed. "Since this happened. You're more confident, more comfortable taking charge." She was right. Being forced to stand up, to use my position to protect others, had changed something in me. I'd spent years hiding behind my work, avoiding the responsibility that came with my inheritance. Derek's betrayal had pushed me out of that comfortable anonymity. "Dad would be proud," Nina said softly, "of how you handled this. Of who you're becoming." That night, I stayed late in the office, thinking about legacy. My father had built something meaningful, not just a successful company but a place where people could thrive. I'd almost lost that through inaction, through my desire to remain invisible. Derek had almost destroyed it through misguided ambition. Between us, we'd nearly wrecked something valuable. But we hadn't. We'd pulled back from the edge, learned hard lessons, started building something sustainable. A few months later, the board met to discuss leadership structure going forward. Derek's probationary period was ending. The question was whether to restore his full authority or maintain the current oversight. Patricia Wells opened the discussion. Derek has made significant improvements. Client satisfaction is up, employee retention has stabilized, and financial metrics are strong. The question before us is whether these changes are sustainable. Kenneth spoke next. I've been impressed by Derek's willingness to adapt. He's shown humility I didn't expect. But can he maintain this when pressure increases again? All eyes turned to me. As majority shareholder, my opinion carried weight. I thought carefully before speaking. Derek made serious mistakes, I said. He hurt people and damaged the company. Those facts don't disappear. But over the past months, I've watched him work harder than anyone else. I've seen him admit errors publicly, change his approach, build real relationships with his team. I paused, choosing my words. The Derek who fired me isn't the Derek sitting in that VP office now. People can change. I believe he has. But that doesn't mean removing all oversight. I propose we maintain quarterly reviews with the board for another year. Give him authority but keep accountability structures in place. The board discussed, debated, and ultimately agreed. Derek would have his authority restored but with continued oversight. When we told him, his relief was visible but tempered. He understood this was earned trust, conditional and fragile. Thank you, he said simply. I won't waste this chance. As the year progressed, something unexpected happened. Derek and I started rebuilding our friendship, carefully and slowly. It began with small things. Coffee before Monday meetings. Occasional lunches discussing company strategy. Conversations that gradually became more personal, touching on topics beyond work. One afternoon, Derek brought up his wedding. The date's in 6 months, he said. I know things between us are still complicated, but I'd like you to be there. Not as best man, I know that ship sailed. But as a guest. As someone who matters to me. I didn't answer immediately. The wound of his betrayal had healed but left scars. Still, there was something brave about his asking, about acknowledging what had been lost while hoping for what might remain. I'll be there, I said. His face showed genuine surprise and gratitude. Really? Really? But Derek, I need you to understand something. I'm coming because I see who you're trying to become. Not because I've forgotten who you were when things got hard. He nodded. Fair enough. Over the next months, I watched Derek continue growing. He started mentoring junior employees, sharing his mistakes openly as teaching moments. He built systems to ensure decisions weren't made unilaterally. He created a culture where dissent was welcomed, where challenging leadership was seen as strength, not disloyalty. The company thrived. We landed new clients, expanded operations, hired carefully. Employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement. People felt heard, valued, secure. My father's vision was alive and evolving. One evening, almost exactly a year after that terrible morning when Derek fired me, we sat in a bar sharing drinks. The conversation wandered from business to sports to memories of college. At one point, Derek set down his beer and looked at me seriously. I need to tell you something, he said. I'm in therapy now. Have been for months. I was surprised. That's good. I started because I couldn't sleep, he explained. After everything happened, after watching you walk out of that conference room, I kept replaying it. I realized I didn't like who I'd become. So I'm working on it, understanding why I let fear and ego control me. That takes courage, I said. He shrugged. I don't know about courage. Necessity, maybe. I looked at my life and realized that if I didn't change something fundamental, I'd keep hurting people. Keep losing what matters. I didn't want that. We talked for hours that night, honestly and openly in ways we hadn't since before his promotion. It felt different from our college friendship, more mature, more aware of human fragility. When I got home that night, I sat in my apartment thinking about the past year. About how one moment of betrayal had revealed truths that needed revealing. About how pain, properly processed, could lead to growth. I thought about my father, about his quiet wisdom and patient investment in things that mattered. 6 months later, I stood in the back of a church watching Derek get married. The ceremony was beautiful, intimate. When Derek and his partner exchanged vows, promising to support each other through challenges and changes, I found myself moved. After the ceremony at the reception, Derek found me. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I know it wasn't easy." "It was easier than I expected," I replied honestly. "I'm happy for you." He smiled. "You know, a year ago I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. My best friend, my credibility, my self-respect. But losing those things forced me to rebuild them properly. To become someone worth having them." "Heavy thoughts for your wedding day," I said. "Maybe, but true thoughts." We stood there together, older and wiser than we'd been a year ago. The friendship we'd salvaged wasn't what it had been, but it was real, built on truth instead of nostalgia. As I drove home that night, I thought about justice and mercy, about consequences and second chances. Derek had hurt me deeply, betrayed our friendship for ego and fear. But he'd also done the hard work of changing, of becoming better. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Acknowledge our failures, make amends where possible, and commit to being better tomorrow than we were today. The company continued thriving, built on lessons learned from our mistakes. And I continued learning to embrace my role, to honor my father's legacy while building my own. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with redemption. Not because Derek deserved it, but because transformation, however painful, is always possible.